Welcome to another episode of the Guy Code. I'm Ronald Serna. Guys, on this episode, we're going to be covering a very interesting subject. And this subject came about because of where I live. Where I live, there's an apartment complex whereby there are some young men who live a very interesting lifestyle. And this leads to this title whereby we're talking about the Mumama dating in Kenya. This is between relationships and interactions, sexual relationships between young men and older women. Now, these men in this apartment actually are living by the means of older women. These older women pay for their rent and their upkeep, and these women get to come from this very popular, high-flying and elite estate, upper class, and it's quite close to it. So they just come in the evening and they get to have a time with these young men, and they get to go back to for some of them they have families and husbands, everything. So it's quite the situation. So getting to realize this, I wanted to understand what makes these men go for this particular interaction, and what are the consequences of these particular interactions. So first of all, I think the most obvious one, guys, is finances. These young men are lured by these older women because the older women have the means to provide a certain lifestyle that is quite attractive to these young men. And by young, I believe college age. So I think oldest I would say is 24 on average. On average, some of them are 22, 23. So they live in this estate, in this apartment complex, and their apartment is fully furnished. They are well taken care of. They have their needs met. So this lifestyle for someone who is just getting into adulthood and getting to have maybe almost a fully established arrangement, and all they have to do, which to them at the time seems like a very easy task of pleasing this woman, they are lured into such arrangements. So the most obvious one is finances. And you wonder what attracts these older women to these young men. Why these young men? Well, interestingly, what we can see and what I got to realize that I want to share with you guys is that both of them have two things in common. Number one, they have relatively high sex drives. So these are young men who are getting to adulthood. They're just getting into their full masculinity. They have a lot of energy. So they have high sex drives, They're just, most of them, I think ideally on average in Kenya, say that most people get to experience their first sexual encounters by on average from our research about 16. So they're still in that age gap and trying to figure out and enjoy their sexual identity, if you can say that. So they have high sex drives, they're young men. Secondly, these older women, and I have heard that older women also get to have also high sex drives, right? Whereas they mature and as they grow older. So both of them have that high sex drive, and also both of them, when it comes to how society perceives them, both of them are seen almost the same way. How? Because when a young man is young and inexperienced, he's not of much use to society. You don't have a skill set yet. You're working on getting a skill set. And the lady is past her prime. Maybe she's already given birth. She's already raised the children. Right now, she's just living in her golden years, whereby she can be a grandmother and just do what grandmothers do, ideally in retirement. Or not even just in retirement, just past the giving birth phase. So ideally, both of them are seen as generally, more often than not, low status in society. So what happens is, when these two similarities come together, and I get to see this in one another, it's a match made in heaven, basically. So they come together, and the experience is that these older women get to be more patient with these young men. Unlike the peers of these young men, for women who, especially in this day and age, with the internet, with social media, with globalization, we're getting to find out that there are young girls who are getting into 2021 and they want a fully established guy. They're seeing people live this very incredible lifestyle. They're traveling around the world. They're doing this and that. And you're seeing this at 20. And you want this for yourself at 20. Will a fellow 20-year-old man do this for you? No, he cannot, ideally, right? Unless he comes for money. But now, this lady who is in her prime and she's getting into herself, she's getting all this attention, will she give this young guy a chance when she wants this kind of treatment of what she sees online? People having these very exotic trips, having these very exotic gifts given to them, and she wants this for herself, and her peer can't provide that. She will look for someone else who can. Now, this leaves this young man, his peers are not interested in him. What happens? He is lured by these older women who now they're able to provide this lifestyle for themselves and him, and they're able to be a bit more patient with his situation. Why? Because been there, done that, and probably she has been traveling for the last decade and more. And so these things aren't big to her. And so when you find someone who hasn't, it's not a big deal. It's not a burning desire she has, maybe in her 40s. In her 40s. So these women are a bit more patient with this young man. However, we should understand that this patience can also run out. And this is where it comes about the consequence of this relationship. It's not a long-term thing, right? It's not long-term. People change, and especially women with what they change with what they need, because it can be very thrilling at the beginning, but what future does it have for the lady? Ladies really love realistically. They're like, okay, this young guy is very fun, which is great. He makes me feel young again, which is great, but it's not something long-term that I can actually bank on and say, okay, I think will grow into something. It will not. So it ends very fast. And also, from what I have been told about these men who live this lifestyle, that these women can be very territorial, right? These women can be very territorial, whereby in this apartment complex that is next to mine, the ladies and the women who get to pay rent for these young men, they clearly tell the security that they do not want any lady to visit these young men. They don't want any lady to show up to this house that they are paying rent for, So they are very territorial. In fact, there's a story of this one young man who he's been kept completely, fully furnished house. In fact, he even got a car from this lady, a vehicle, quite a vehicle. And this lady clearly told him that at whatever time and day, when this lady calls this young man, she wants this young man to have that engine of that car on, whether it's mid-morning, whether it's 2 o'clock in the night. So we can assume that this man is always pretty practically on call for this woman. Is that an arrangement that most men will appreciate just for the lifestyle? I don't know. I don't think so. I think you can do better and get better for yourself, because you're pretty much someone else's territory, someone else's property. And I think with that, I've just given you something to think about. For those who know people who are in these arrangements, if you have been in this arrangement or considering, or if you are in one right now, I will really like to hear your comments on this. the comments. You can actually reach out to the comments. You can reach out via X or via Telegram community. I hope it really will be a conversation that will continue. And until next time, guys, we shall talk soon. Bye.
Guy Code with Rena Osware.